First question for you is, do you believe that robotaxi is just around the corner? So if so, who other than Tesla might be able to make cars autonomous? Well, George Hotz, the founder of Comma.ai, a company that develops self-driving technology, just posted on X over the weekend that he believes they will be first. So today, we're going to learn more about Comma.ai's technology, why GM decided to suspend their Cruz operations, and a review of other Lidar-based companies. So we have Hans Nelson joining us. He's a mechanical engineer who does deep dives on Tesla's technologies, and he's got his own YouTube channel at Hans C. Nelson. Welcome, Hans.
Thanks for having me, Herbert.
So we've had, you and I, banger videos that we've done that you did talking about George Hotz. And so there's a lot of demand and interest in their technology, and we're going to find out a little bit more of why that is. So let's kind of review what's happened here. So this video was posted by this guy named John Coogan just several days ago. And he actually visited George in San Diego. They went and talked to each other, and he released that video. We're going to watch clips of that. And over the weekend, George replied to one of our more recognizable Tesla community members, Emmett Peppers, and he said, we're going to win self-driving cars. This is George just a few days ago saying we will win self-driving cars. So he responded to Emmett's reaction to that video. Here's what Emmett said. So below is a great profile vid on George Hotz. We're going to learn more about who he is and what Comma.ai is up to. And Emmett says, don't sleep on Comma. And he said, I once had them at 1% solving FSD before Tesla. Now he's up to 5 to 10% chance that they're going to solve before Tesla, and a 25 to 50% chance that they're going to be the second right behind Tesla. Now, I know you've been following this closely. Hans, what's your reaction when you saw this?
It doesn't surprise me. This has been George's take for a long time. And so I think it may be important to contextualize just for listeners. When George says he's going to win autonomous vehicles, what he's saying is that he believes that they're going to be the first ones to create the Android version of autonomous vehicles that can work with basically any car, any modern vehicle at least, and that as the decentralized solution, they may not accrue the most market value, but just like Android actually runs on many more phones than iOS, that Comma.ai will run on many more autonomous vehicles than Tesla's FSD.
Right. So good point, right? So currently Tesla is creating full self-driving, and they're willing to license it though. So it'll be interesting if George's idea of being the Android version, which is basically being open source, they're creating the technology, but letting any car company and retrofitting old companies to be able to attach to this, if that's going to make a difference because of Tesla being, as opposed to Apple, who was closed garden. So let's learn more about George. It's a 3.5-minute video, and we'll see more what they're up to.
He was always hacking things as a kid. When he was just 5 years old, he wrote his first computer program on his dad's Apple II. And by 5th grade, he was building his own video game console using electronic parts from Radio Shack. He made national news when he became the first person to ever unlock an iPhone so it could work with any carrier. The iPhone was factory locked to AT&T, but George had a T-Mobile plan.
Hi everyone, I'm Gio. This is the world's first unlocked iPhone.
I went home and looked at my T-Mobile SIM and put it in, and it said invalid SIM. So ever since then, I've been trying to make my iPhone work with T-Mobile.
Gio hot, and he was the first person to jailbreak an iPhone. And last month, he was the first one to fully hack the PS3 console.
2015 was a big year for artificial intelligence. DeepMind was making big progress in key areas of machine learning. And don't forget, this was the year that OpenAI was founded. Self-driving cars were starting to look like a reality, and every automotive executive started making ambitious claims about how quickly they would be rolling out full self-driving capabilities. Elon was one of the first to really push the field forward at Tesla.
A friend approached me, and he's like, do you want to meet with Elon Musk? He's looking for somebody to build a vision system. This is when they were still on AP1. They were still using Mobileye. Elon back then was looking for a replacement. He brought me in and we talked about a contract where I would deliver something that meets Mobileye level performance. I would get paid $12 million if I could deliver it tomorrow, and I would lose $1 million for every month I didn't deliver.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com. I got to pause it there because that's so incredible bit of news there, or information that I didn't know. So 2015, Tesla, you can tell me the history, but Tesla's full self-driving, they were using Mobileye. Elon realizes that we need a vision-based software. He approached George Hotz and gave him a contract to build it for him. Any thoughts on this? And do you have any memory of what happened?
Yeah, so I've dug into the history since then. I wasn't really following Tesla closely at the time, but it has been very interesting because so George was one of the people that Elon approached before he ended up building the in-house autopilot team, and the hardware and the infrastructure that they ended up using. And we know that eventually Andrei Karpathy went on to lead that, but that was after this incident that George shares, and it's just a fun story because it illustrates kind of the audacity and the interesting way that it's it was a very hard problem, and Elon was playing with the incentives, and I'm sure trying to give George a challenge that would be interesting and motivating to him. But yeah, to say, hey, I'll give you $12 million if you can replace what I'm already using today. And so if it takes you a month, then you get 11 million. If it takes you 2 months, then you get 10. And if it takes you a year to do that, then you owe me $1 million every month that you're late. And obviously,
Sure.
George would have been not very intelligent to accept the deal on those terms. I'm sure there was a lot of negotiation back and forth on what that would look like. But George is unlike Andre. He is a very independent person, and he likes to set all of the parameters of the his working conditions and the projects that he's working on. And so it was probably unlikely that that relationship was ever going to work out. It's one thing for him to go and spend a little time as I mean, this is why he went to Twitter as an unpaid intern instead of an employee. Like, that gave George the leeway and the control to work on what he wanted to work on, how he wanted to work on it, where he wanted to work on it. And then, that relationship lasted as long as it lasted. And once he had satisfied his curiosity, he was out. And so we've seen that in the same situation. I think George is an interesting person in the very first principles, and this is one of the reasons why Elon, I'm sure, was attracted to him in the first place, but the very first principles approach on how to solve problems. And I agree with Emmett that there's definitely, I've been of the opinion for a long time now that the competition for full self-driving spots number one and number two are Tesla and George Hotz's Comma.ai. And people think that that's crazy to make that assumption because look at Comma, they're so small. They're a tiny company. They don't have all of the resources necessary. They don't have a fleet. They don't have the data. And those are definitely two challenges that are ahead for Comma AI. But one of the things that people don't realize is that he didn't take basically any venture funding for Comma. He has almost entire control of that company. It is profitable, and so it's self-funding, self-sustaining, and he is working within the constraints of trying to innovate on the core technology that's going to be um, required in order to solve FSD, and that's kind of where Tiny Corp came out of, is that, he doesn't have the ability. I think, on the Lex podcast, he said they have 40 petaflops of compute, whereas, Tesla's installing hundreds of exaflops right now. And so, they're just completely different orders of magnitude of compute resources. And George knows that those compute resources are what are necessary to solve this problem with an end-to-end approach, which I think we've had another episode talking about that a while ago, what that approach means and why it is the right approach. And this is why I believe that Tesla and um, George and Comma AI are the only ones competing for one and two, because as far as I can tell, they're the only two that are actually, not only is it the vision neural network system that they're using, but they're trying to approach the learning problem. How do you learn a human policy of driving? They're approaching that from an end to end at least end-to-end on the, Tesla's on end-to-end on the inference hardware, and moving more and more towards end-to-end training in the compute cluster. And this is the approach that George is also pursuing. And that's
Yeah.
the right overall strategy. That's how humans, like, you've got to figure out how to learn. Like,
Yeah.
you need a system that is intelligent, that can learn in order to cover all the edge cases. And these are the two companies that are doing that. So where he's going with Tiny Corp is really trying to give power both to Comma.ai, but in so doing to the wider world, to have access to compute resources that are able to employ the largest, do training and do inference with very meaningful pieces of software and hardware.
Yeah. Okay. So much here. We're going to go watch more video here to learn more what Comma.ai's technology is. You pointed out that they're actually one of the other few that's vision only. And we're going to cover also a little bit later here how many Lidar companies are failing. They're realizing that vision only is the approach. But Comma.ai and Tesla has been doing it for so long. Then you kind of hinted on the Tiny Corp company, which is what George decided to, he founded Comma.ai. Then he left Comma.ai because he found another company called Tiny Corp, because you needed to have the machine learning AI neural network company that can then be used by Comma.ai. And so that's just when you mentioned that's what that is.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's watch
And
a
I
little bit more
think
of
the assertion that he left Comma.ai,
Mm.
I think that's a little bit of an assumption from people on the outside. I think that he's saying that for now his focus is on what is essentially going to be the dojo piece of what Comma.ai is doing. It is its own separate company, but I
I see.
am fairly certain that he's doing that while he's in the Comma facilities, and that he's still very engaged. He's sole controller of Comma.ai. That is, when he talked to Lex about this in the interview 4 months ago, Lex was thinking about, hey, how is Tiny Corp going to impact the future AI girlfriend company that George wants to start? And he's like, no, let's talk about how I'm going to use this in Comma.ai. And so he's circling back. This is just his it's just the way that George is dividing the problem up, is that he separates, instead of having divisions inside of Tesla like Elon does, he separates the divisions into their own independent companies and tries to get them to each be self-sustaining and self-funding on their own. And I think that the pressure that he uses allows each division to work better overall and create a better end result, not only for Tiny Corp, but also for the wider world. That, I think
Yeah.
one of the things that he really is trying to make a difference on is the fact that right now NVIDIA has a stranglehold on the future of artificial intelligence globally. And he wants to return power to individuals and small companies. The only people who are really um, shielded from that monopoly are Google and Tesla's potentially on the right path. They're not there yet. I mean, we'll see how it looks like Dojo is going to get them there, but it's not a done deal. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And this video we're watching of John Coogan's interview of George was actually just several days ago that he actually visited them, and it's all about Comma.ai. So let's learn more about how Comma.ai works. Let's watch more video.
George had a different idea of what the future could look like. He thought that Tesla was essentially building the iPhone of self-driving cars, a closed system that couldn't be modified by the owner of the car. George has always been focused on empowering individuals to use technology however they want. Unlocking the iPhone let people use whatever carrier they wanted, and jailbreaking the PS3 let people run any software they wanted. George wanted to build the Android of self-driving and make autonomous cars accessible to everyone. He started Comma almost a decade ago now, so I wanted to see how his company works firsthand. So I went to their headquarters and sat down with George to discuss his company and the future of self-driving. This relaxing San Diego office is where the company manufactures the Comma 3X. The product marks a shift from developer kits to consumer product and is way easier to set up, especially if you're non-technical. The device has cameras, microphones, GPS, and Wi-Fi, everything you need to connect to the car and take over steering and acceleration.
So originally my plan was, okay, I'm going to make autopilot, I'm going to sell it to car manufacturers. So I didn't realize that the hard part of that was not the make autopilot part. The hard part of that was the sell to the car manufacturers part. And you look at a company like Mobileye and you realize that Mobileye spends more money on business development than they do in R&D. That was kind of how I got the idea for the business model. I'm like, well, let's just get this out to people. And then now we have a whole army of people basically working for us, rooting for us to solve self-driving cars.
George's company produces two main products. The first is the actual device, which you can buy on their website.
The 3X is really a refinement to the 3. We use half the parts. It has half the components.
The second is the open source software that runs on the device. It's called OpenPilot, and because it's open source, it can be modified by anyone who wants to change how the software works for free. And then I installed my Comma 3 in my own car. The device is pretty simple. It just takes in streams of data from the outside world through the cameras and sensors, and then outputs control signals through a port under your steering wheel.
The Comma 3X is the first one to ship with Navigate and OpenPilot. You can type in a destination, and it's like an early era FSD.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Open source. Yeah. Tell me. This is so much there. Go ahead. Take whatever you want.
yeah, I think the big takeaway from that is the fact that they are following along, and he's also said that Tesla is 1 to 2 years ahead of Comma.ai. And the fact that they're doing a lot of the pioneering work actually kind of makes it easier for George to follow them. But you can see, like, it's very impressive to have. So you made the claim that, the hard part is selling to the automotive companies. It's not necessarily creating, and he said specifically autopilot. So he's not saying FSD, he said autopilot. And he believes that the Comma 3X is already, comparable, probably superior to the performance of just pure autopilot. And that if auto manufacturing companies wanted to buy that from him and put it in their cars today, that they could, but they're not. And so he's going around them, back to his, hacker and decentralized power ethos and roots, and selling directly to consumers. And so they sell just the hardware. And then, like you said, the software is completely open source. And so they are developing it, but they also have an ecosystem of independent developers that port the software into vehicles that are not officially supported by the main branch of the OpenPilot software. But they also do all kinds of other things, like change the features. Like, they have driver monitoring on their system, but there are versions that have been, branches of the software where there's no driver monitoring and there's no nag. And like, you could actually, you know, you would be responsible, but you can create a car that will drive without you actually paying attention to where you're going. Um, and that's just one of a variety of, different variations and flavors, just like you see with any open source project, of things that people have taken that they've done whatever they want to with it. But by making it open source, they do have access to a much wider, and this is a choice that, as a small team that is not going to um, have the payroll ability to just hire, tons and tons and tons of developers to work on whatever problems that they have. They're getting access to much more development time and effort by creating an open source product. And it's another thing also that really helps to bug test and harden the security and the feature set of OpenPilot. And it's a tried and true software development model. And they can continue to iterate on the hardware and sell, fund their company through the sale of just that set of hardware. And it also gives them a great place to work on. It's incredible that they have such performant, inference hardware that's running on Qualcomm Snapdragon mobile GPUs. Um, and so the limitations that they have on their software development ecosystem, the price point that they're selling to consumers, I think these things run for about $3,000 to buy a 3X. I could be wrong. That was what the 3 was, if I remember correctly, and I haven't looked up the 3X specifically. But that's significantly cheaper than FSD. Obviously, they're trying to accomplish what FSD is doing with way less hardware than the FSD computer that Tesla's using, far fewer camera sensors. And that is a way to continue to make forward progress in a very cost efficient way that, eventually, in the long arc of development of artificial intelligence software, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, high school students will be able to compile libraries and, write their own full self-driving autonomous vehicle software as just a class project. It's going to get there. So then the question is, okay, how does it get there? And is there a shortcut path to whether or not it's an open question exactly what will take as far as data and as far as compute infrastructure to solve FSD for the first time. And since it's an open question, we don't know if the first solution is just going to be throwing massive amounts of data and compute at the problem, or if it's going to be a core innovation in the method of training and the method of data collection, and the size and the quality and the diversity of the data that's thrown at it. If George is able to make a fundamental innovation and breakthrough in the training methodology and resources, which is entirely possible. It's not something, and that's why Emmett puts the chance at, it started at 1%, now it's 25, I think 10 to 25%, is that's not something that's likely to happen, but it is possible. Just based on George's background, and when you listen to him, you realize that he understands machine learning at a level that very few people do, and is approaching problems in a very unique way. And there definitely could be a there. And but at the very least, if he's not able to make that innovation to be first, I think he is in a very good position to understand exactly how Tesla solved the problem if Tesla gets there first, and to very quickly be able to bring a product to market that offers functionality to the end user in any vehicle that is very close to what FSD is able to accomplish for personal uses. Now, whether this ends up being useful as a robotaxi is going to be a whole nother question. But as far as FSD for personal usage, and probably at a price point that's going to be significantly cheaper than FSD. And so that really has a major impact on the assumptions around the value that Tesla is able to capture from FSD, because a lot of people are looking at the landscape and they're looking at Cruz and Waymo and all these Lidar based approaches, and they're seeing, those solutions are never going to scale. And so Tesla is going to exist in an FSD market ecosystem where they just don't have any competition. And I don't think that they're not going to have meaningful competition within the 1 to 2 year time frame. And I think that that's going to come from Comma.
Yeah. Okay, good. So there's so much here, but you pointed out very good points. And so I looked it up, and currently today, Comma.ai has 100 million miles because of the open source model. And I don't know how many cars, because people are just installing their their
Mhm.
Comma 1 into all their own regular cars, even gas cars, and they're just using it.
Yep.
But I'm still skeptical that, yes, they're going to be. I love what you said though, that they're going to be the fast follower, and they can do it cheaper, and so they're going to have their own segment. And but at least they're doing vision, and at least they're doing
Mhm.
neural nets. So
Yep.
with the Tiny Corp, and so he's a hacker. You don't count him out. He's brilliant the way he's approaching this with because of his own small startup mind versus the big boys. Trying to figure out how to do this right. So fantastic. Yeah. So we just bringing back up again what he had said here. He goes, "We will win self-driving cars." So obviously the boastfulness there. And Emmett saying that, I had them once at 1% solving FSD before Tesla, now 5 to 10%. That part I don't believe that they'll solve FSD beforehand. But 25 to 50% that they're at least second right behind Tesla. I
Mhm.
agree. Okay, so let's quickly cover some more topics here, which is, what's happened with Cruz, right? So GM Cruz, as most people might have heard by now, they suspended the operation. This was Cruz themselves saying that the most important thing for us right now is to take steps to rebuild public trust. What happened was in San Francisco, Cruz, another driver hit a pedestrian, a gas car driver, human, and then Cruz autonomously ran over that driver. And then the San Francisco kind of Department of Motor Vehicles said, we need to stop your operation in San Francisco because you did not provide us the right video. So Cruz stopped it, but then Cruz then announced they're going to stop not only in San Francisco, but all the other states that they were, cities that they were operating in. In that spirit, we have decided to proactively pause driverless operations across all of our fleets while we take time to examine our processes, systems, and tools. So I think that they know that this was a significant hit public relations wise, and they are probably concerned that it might happen again, and so they want to pull it. This is what Cruise looks like if they're using the Lidar system. Oops, this is their cars. They outfit it with all these cars, but even with the Lidar and the vision system, they weren't able to identify a body on the ground, which then they ran over, and they weren't able to identify. And we believe that Tesla's system of vision only, which is much more neural net capable, can identify pedestrians better, would have identified that. So this isn't related to any new on-road incidents, and supervised AV operations will continue. So now they're supervised, which is what Tesla's continue to do right now. It's always still supervised. The other bit of news was, or not news for many of us who's following this, but many LiDAR experts on on Twitter, on X, has been telling us that FSD will not come to complete fruition without LiDAR. So many people are still LiDAR proponents. They say Waymo and Cruz and a bunch of other Chinese providers as proof of their support for their argument. But now we're seeing one by one, and we've been watching this over several years, Chinese companies are coming out one after another to declare that they're no longer going to use HD maps and LiDAR and rely only on the vision approach, which is what Elon has been saying for years. Their move basically has validated the claim by Elon that LiDAR is a fool's errand. We've been seeing many LiDAR companies fall out of business. And the biggest tell is that when you have a CEO of a founder of a previous LiDAR company come out and they start a new company and they don't use LiDAR. So you got Baidu, Li Auto, Huawei, Xiaopeng, NIO. They've all said that they're going to remove LiDAR from their future vehicles. So just a death knell at this point. I mean, LiDAR is just not the right path at all. So final comments on that?
When you look at the Cruz incident, it's hard to say whether it was a sensing incident or whether it was an intelligence and response issue. Because my understanding is that they were trying to pull over, it seemed like they sensed that it was a situation that caused alarm and that they just needed to pull over to the side of the road to be safe, not realizing that the person was under the vehicle. And I mean, that really could be either thing, but in my mind, I can definitely see there's so many pathways that you can have bugs in line by line written heuristic code that says if this then this, if this then this, if this then this. And that could very well have just been the computer's ability to understand the situation that it was in and respond appropriately, which is an intelligence and a software issue, not necessarily a hardware issue. And obviously that software is going to be complicated by the fact that it's having to process so many different streams and types of incoming data from all the different sensors. But I think that's one of the things that points out that this approach of heuristic code just is not going to ever be able to accurately deal with the complexities that are going to be thrown at it in the real world. And so these companies that are using as many crutches as necessary, they're only operating in confined areas, they're only operating where they have HD maps, and they're using Lidar to do millimeter level location in space, and all of these things. They're things that you need if you don't have an intelligent system that can make decisions on its own, and they are brittle. And this is an example of how and they're brittle and how they're going to continue to be brittle. And so this just, I feel like, points back to the fact that once again, Tesla and Comma.ai, they're trying to solve the real problem in the real place, and that's give the vehicle actual intelligence to be able to make decisions, and evaluate scenarios in real time and do something that a human would do. And you just can't do that with hard brittle code. The other piece that it signals to me is the broader thing. Every single one of those tweets that Cruz put out mentioned public trust. And that is going to be an interesting thing that has to be managed. And I like the fact that at the end of the day, right now, Tesla is not liable. That comes down to the individual operating the vehicle. I think the longer that companies, and once again, this is also the policy of Comma, that the individual is responsible. And so the longer that you can stay level 2 and you can have the individual behind the steering wheel be the responsible party in anything that goes wrong, the less you have to deal with this overall. And it's not that, Tesla doesn't have public safety and public trust FUD and concerns and all that. But at the end of the day, their ability to operate the system is not dictated by public perception. And so they can continue to make progress. Right now, Cruz is stalled out, and they're going to continue to be stalled out. And anytime they have an incident, it's going to create another stall, which is going to prolong their ability to make progress. And so, it's just going to bleed cash until wherever the funding source is completely dried up and the thing dies. Whereas Tesla and Comma are able to continue moving forward, making progress, and day by day just increasing their lead overall from these Lidar and heuristic code based competitors.
There you go. Well said. That's a great point. So it's not about necessarily the hardware, although it is, because we know that Lidar is really a crutch. Nobody needs to use it. Vision only works. Comma is showing it. Tesla's showing it. Many of these companies that we just said in China has realized that they just do that. But more importantly, it's the companies that have the neural nets. And Waymo might have it, but Cruz certainly doesn't have it. And although they are showing you that they're robotaxi ready today, it really isn't going to be the full solution in the future. Thank you again, Hans. Follow him on X at Hans C. Nelson. He also has his own YouTube channel. Incredibly brilliant. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks, Hans.